Aún no me aparece el circulito.
No, Miriam, vamos a empezar la interpretación después de que dé las instrucciones para activarla.
Perfecto.
Gracias.
Okay, we're streaming.
Okay. Maria Angelica, I'm going to hand it over to you to explain how the interpretation will work.
Thank you, Laura. Buenos días, mi nombre es María Angélica, mis pronombres son ella y ellex y hoy voy a estar proveyendo interpretación en español y en inglés con Marb Language Services. Este es un espacio multilingüe y va a ser muy importante que para que ustedes puedan escuchar las historias de todas las personas que hoy las van a compartir hoy, que elijan su idioma que prefieren en la interpretación. Entonces, si ustedes están conectados en Zoom en este momento, en la parte de abajo de la derecha de la pantalla, en unos momentos van a ver un globo que dice interpretación. Si ustedes le hacen clic, pueden escoger español para escuchar todos los testimonios en español, inglés para escuchar todos los testimonios en inglés, y si quieren escuchar el audio original, que va a ser en español y en inglés, eligen tener la interpretación apagada. Muchas gracias. Good afternoon, good morning. My name is Maria Angelica. My pronouns are she and they, and today I will be providing Spanish and English interpretation with Marb Language Services. This is a multilingual space, and if you want to make sure to listen to everyone's testimonies today, you will be using Zoom interpretation if you are connected to Zoom right now. In a few moments, you're going to see a globe at the bottom right-hand corner that says interpretation. When you click on it, you can choose Spanish if you want to listen to the testimonies in Spanish, English if you want to listen to the testimonies in English, and if you want to hear the original audio, which will be in Spanish and in English, you just choose to have the interpretation off. Thank you very much. And I'll pass it on to you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Maria Angelica. Good morning.
Okay, perfect. Interpretation is on. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. Very happy to be here. My name is Laura Goodhue. I am the Executive Director of the Florida Alliance of Planned Parenthood Affiliates, and my pronouns are she and her. And thanks for joining us today for our Mics On and Bands Off virtual event to allow people with firsthand experience accessing abortion care later in pregnancy to share their stories with you. We're here today to provide public testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 744 and House Bill 351. This is an attempt to ban abortion in the state of Florida past 20 weeks. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and the Florida legislature should have a way for people to provide remote testimony, but they don't. So we're using this platform to speak out against yet another attack on abortion access in Florida. And frankly, on top of the risks around traveling to Tallahassee due to COVID, if people you're going to hear from today tried to share their very personal later abortion stories in a committee hearing, there's a good chance they would hear shaming remarks from legislators and not be allowed time to fully tell their story. So it may take a while, but we're going to give them that platform and that respect today, where the mics are on and we want the bands off. With that, please allow me to introduce our first speaker, Diane Alarcón, who will provide her testimony today in Spanish, and Maria Angelica will provide simultaneous interpretation. Diane, over to you.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Diana Alarcón. Estoy con el Instituto de Latinas para la Salud Reproductiva en Florida. Cuando tenía 27 años, quedé embarazada. Ya era madre de 2 niños, una de 4 años y otro de 1 año. Vivía en Miami y mi situación económica era precaria. No teníamos aún un lugar estable donde vivir. Acababan de sacarnos del apartamento que rentábamos, de un cuarto donde nos acomodábamos 5 personas. No fue una decisión fácil, pero sabía muy dentro de mí que no era el momento indicado para tener otro hijo. Estábamos tratando apenas de salir adelante en el país y ni mi esposo ni yo teníamos un trabajo estable que nos permitiera solventar mi embarazo. Sin seguro médico, ni acceso a ninguna atención. Sería irresponsable de nuestra parte continuar con el embarazo. Interrumpir mi embarazo fue un acto de amor y responsabilidad. La mayoría de las personas que nos hacemos un aborto ya somos madres. Son decisiones muy difíciles que tomamos con el apoyo de nuestras familias y amigos. Y yo, como una mujer de fe, me siento en paz con Dios. Las prohibiciones del aborto nos perjudican porque agregan otra barrera para el acceso ya limitado a los servicios de salud. Muchas latinas tienen múltiples trabajos que no ofrecen días de enfermedad, cobertura de seguro, viven en comunidades en servicios insuficientes, no tienen ni el tiempo ni el dinero para acceder a los servicios de aborto. Para personas de bajos ingresos, puede tomar mucho tiempo recaudar dinero para la atención necesaria de salud y decidir si ponen comida en la mesa o ponemos comida en la mesa de nuestras familias. Los temores de las mujeres inmigrantes, latinas y de color en torno a su estatus legal afecta sus decisiones de obtener un aborto, los cuales se vuelven aún más difíciles y costosos de obtener cuando son postergados. Para las personas jóvenes, las mujeres de bajos ingresos, las mujeres sin acceso a una educación sexual integral o con condiciones médicas, el embarazo puede tardar más en sospecharse y confirmarse. En mi experiencia y en las cientos de conversaciones que he tenido con otras mujeres y sus familias y mi familia, la decisión de interrumpir el embarazo más tarde es usualmente un tema complicado y triste. Las personas que buscan abortos en el segundo trimestre o más tarde es más que, ¿cómo decirlo? Es más que nada después de desarrollar un problema de salud grave o de conocer una condición genética o de salud del feto en desarrollo, ya que muchas de estas condiciones no pueden diagnosticarse con precisión hasta más tarde en la gestación. En estados que han aprobado leyes como esta, algunas mujeres y sus familias se han visto sometidas a situaciones inimaginables. Necesitan interrumpir un embarazo por motivos médicos graves, pero no pueden hacerlo. Y esto es totalmente inaceptable. Los políticos no son expertos médicos y esta no es un área en la que deberían interferir. A lo largo de su embarazo y de mi embarazo, una mujer debe poder tomar sus propias decisiones con el asesoramiento de su doctor. Gracias por su tiempo.
Thank you so much, Dion. Our next speaker is Dana Pierce, and she's joining us from Maine. Welcome, Dana.
Hello, my name is Dana Pierce, and I live in Yarmouth, Maine. I'm a wife, a mother of 2 living children, and a veterinarian. I'm a Moorhead Cane Scholar and a world champion rower. I'm also someone who has had an abortion later in pregnancy. On January 25th, 2019, I was 32 weeks pregnant with my son, Cameron. But that morning, my husband and I, along with our 3-year-old daughter, went to what we expected to be a routine ultrasound in a normal pregnancy. And that's when we found out that Cameron had lethal skeletal dysplasia, the result of a random, rare genetic mutation that occurs during sperm development. It's lethal because babies with this condition cannot breathe outside the womb. Their rib cages are too small and leave no room for the lungs to expand. Cameron's femur was also broken, and there was evidence of multiple other healed fractures. In short, Cameron was actively suffering, and he faced additional continued suffering and death by suffocation if he managed to make it to term and survive delivery. I cannot really put into words the intensity of anguish and grief that my husband John and I felt in those moments and in the days and weeks that followed. But I must emphasize that my strongest thoughts were that I would not let my son suffer any longer than he already had. I decided to have an abortion, but then we learned that I could not be treated in Maine Because I was so far along in my pregnancy, there are only 3 providers in our country who can perform an abortion at that stage. And these providers are located in DC, Colorado, and New Mexico. In an attempt at damage control, because everything was going wrong and it seemed like everything else would go wrong, first we thought we would go to DC to avoid changing time zones and to be closer to home if anything else went wrong. But we were told that because I was so far along, we would have to argue our case before an ethics review board. So we made the decision to travel to Colorado, and I will be forever thankful for the medical and support staff at the Boulder Abortion Clinic. I mean, thank goodness that there are people willing to literally risk their lives to provide care for women in need. I'm also thankful that John and I had the education, the friend and family support, accommodating employers, and the financial ability to deal with this emergency. Because on top of the expenses for last-minute flights, missed work, a week-long hotel stay, the abortion itself cost $25,000 cash. Because of Cameron's condition, the clinic was the only medical facility that said that I would likely be allowed to see him after birth. The only drawback of the clinic was that there is no anesthesiologist. So I went through an induced labor with only IV pain meds, which is something I do not recommend. I delivered Cameron's body on February 1st, 2019, and we were able to hold him and tell him that we loved him and say goodbye. I was able to access safe, compassionate care in the midst of a deeply grim situation. I was uniquely fortunate to be able to afford the cost of travel, missed work, lodging, and the fee for the abortion itself. The majority of women in my situation in this country would not have been so lucky. There is an incredible amount of misinformation about abortion later in pregnancy. Abortions at this stage of pregnancy are incredibly rare and almost without exception due to a catastrophic diagnosis in a wanted pregnancy. An abortion at 32 weeks involves humane euthanasia of the baby in utero, careful dilation of the cervix over 2 days, and then induction of labor with Pitocin, with the goal of protecting the the mother's fertility and life. Bans and limits on abortion later in pregnancy add exponentially to the mother's grief and suffering. We should instead be making laws to ensure that women facing situations like mine are guaranteed safe, compassionate care and support. Abortion for any reason is a deeply personal decision and should not have anyone involved other than the pregnant woman, her medical team, and any others that she chooses to advise her. Please join me in speaking out and working to change our state and federal laws so that women are trusted to make ethical, loving decisions for their own bodies. Thank you.
Dana, I can't thank you enough for sharing this deeply personal story. Your story and Dion's just highlight how cruel this proposed legislation is. Next, I want to introduce Hadley Tweedall, who is joining us from Tennessee. Hadley?
Hello, my name is Hadley Tweedall, and I live in Franklin, Tennessee. 5 years ago, I had a second trimester abortion at 18 weeks and 3 days pregnant. I was not involved in rape or incest. I was not an unwed teenager. I did not have financial concerns with raising another child. I was not using abortion as a form of birth control. My baby was not unloved, unwanted, an accident, or a mistake. My baby was not a fetus. She was a precious little girl that my husband and I named Grace, meaning gift from God. She was a younger sister, daughter, niece, and granddaughter, and she was so loved and so wanted. During an ultrasound at 17 and a half weeks pregnant, we learned the devastating news that our daughter was sick, fatally sick. Our sweet Grace was diagnosed with trisomy 21 and non-immune hydrops. As a result, her body was filling with fluid and her organs were shutting down one by one. Her little legs had already stopped growing. Multiple specialists told me it was medically impossible for our daughter to survive longer than a few more weeks of pregnancy. Every ounce of excitement and future dream I had about our growing family was taken from me in a matter of minutes. Now, I'm a Christian and I believe in miracles, but I also trust modern medicine. I could not stand the thought of my daughter suffering in the one place she should feel safest. I could not bond with her longer and watch my belly grow even bigger, only to say our inevitable goodbyes. I could not labor for hours to deliver our dead daughter. The day my son was born was the best day of my life. I did not want those beautiful memories of the best day tainted with the worst. My doctor told me waiting several weeks until she passed on her own increased my risk of infection, hemorrhaging, and other medical issues, including death. I did not want to take that risk. I still had the responsibility of being a mother to my son and a wife to my husband. Suddenly, I was faced with the most horrific choice in my life, one that I didn't ask for nor wanted to make. I chose to end my wanted pregnancy. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. My doctor told me that I was unable to end my pregnancy in my own state of Tennessee. I was told that the nearest place I could go was a clinic 4.5 hours away in Atlanta, which would mean I'd have to walk through a sea of protesters to get the medical support I needed. I was overcome with shame when the doctor who delivered my son told me she couldn't perform the procedure. My own state legislators don't trust me, her mother, to make the best decisions for my daughter and family. I felt like a fugitive fleeing the state to have my taboo procedure done in a state that didn't see it that way. On the worst day of my life, I couldn't even go home to my own bed. I had never given much thought to the anti-abortion or pro-choice stance until the laws put in place failed me, leaving me feeling alone, scared, and quite frankly, angry. After our loss, I shied away from the term abortion because there's such a negative stigma around that word. I remember many anti-abortion friends and family saying to me, but your situation's different. While that was comforting to hear at first, I now know that that thinking is the root of the problem. I am not different. The procedure I had is not different. If we continue to shy away from the term abortion, the perceptions will never change and the laws will never change. I had an abortion. This is what it looked like for me. It's not always right or wrong, black or white. Some of us struggle every day in the gray, keeping our experiences under wraps for fear of shame and judgment. We choose not to stand up for our rights in an effort to protect our already broken hearts from even more pain. And so the cycle continues. Anti-abortion protesters shout louder, restrictive laws get passed, and we heartbroken mothers continue to lose our rights to do what's best for our families. Let's end the cycle. Let's break the stigma. Let's reshape the conversation around abortion. One woman's voice can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Hadley. I want to thank Hadley and our next speaker, Lakita, for also fighting against that very law in Tennessee. Learned that they actually have been speaking out on this issue for a while now, and we're in the amicus brief to get those very restrictive laws in Tennessee overturned. And we know that we can't have this happen in Florida. So our next speaker is Lakita Martin, and she's also from Tennessee. Lakita? You're on mute. Can you unmute yourself? That's all right. We still can't hear you, Lakita.
Okay.
There you are.
All right. Lakita Martin. I am also from Tennessee, as she said, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a very personal experience today. It was after 10 years of marriage and one child, 4 miscarriages, my husband and I began assisted fertility treatments. It took 4 rounds, and we were thrilled to be expecting again. We underwent genetic testing, as we had with our previous pregnancies, and the test showed no abnormalities. We had suffered from complications in earlier pregnancies, so I began immediately to work half days, and all seemed to be going well with this pregnancy. During a routine office visit with my obstetrician, close to midway through the pregnancy at 19 weeks, he requested I have another ultrasound. And I questioned this initially, but I also trusted this person immensely and complied. The ultrasound took place at the end of the 19th week. All seemed to be going well when the technician paused and commented she was not seeing something related to the heart of the fetus. She left the room, asked the perinatologist to come in and take a look. As my husband is a medical doctor, I asked him if he knew what the individual was talking about, and he was at a loss as well. The perinatologist came into the room, looked at the ultrasound, and said he concurred with the technician. There was an issue with the fetus heart. He requested I get dressed to come to his office. Upon entering his office, he asked my husband and I to sit down as he had something very serious to discuss with us. This physician explained he saw 2 heart defects on the ultrasound that were incompatible with life outside the womb. He had contacted a pediatric cardiologist in the area, and we were to immediately leave and go to his office. The pediatric cardiologist did some more testing and provided us with medical options. My husband and I were in shock, but somehow managed to drive to the second office. After further testing, the pediatric cardiologist explained there were actually 3 heart defects. Although one could possibly be corrected, the other 2 could only be treated by a heart transplant. This very kind and compassionate physician explained the availability of heart infants for transplants were very rare, and he recommended we terminate the pregnancy. I explained that was not an option for us, as we had just spent $20,000 to receive the fertility treatments to conceive this child. With my history of pregnancy complications, I was farther along than I thought possible. I could not imagine, couldn't terminate this pregnancy. And we left the office heartbroken. In the following week, my husband and I met with 3 doctors locally, with each giving us no hope for our dream of walking a second child into kindergarten one day. As a physician, my husband made calls all around the country, talking with different pediatric cardiologists. None of the 5 doctors he spoke with gave us any hope. As we explained to each physician, the time needed to care for the sick infant nor the money involved were not a consideration for us. Our primary concern was we did not want suffering. One doctor, who also was our next door neighbor, spelled out our options so clearly. We knew exactly what we were facing, but also the long invasive journey the infant would endure if we chose to carry to full term and try heroic measures for possible survival. In addition to the multiple specialized physicians, we spoke with 3 members of the clergy in our religious community. We also talked with family members and close friends. Through these discussions, the decision to terminate the pregnancy was the one we realized we must make if our greatest concern was for the least amount of suffering for the fetus. Had we given birth and done no heroic measures, he would have suffocated to death. I went into the hospital on the last day of my 20th week. After 21 hours of labor with my husband holding my hand, I delivered a very small baby boy. The hospital staff dressed him in a special dressing gown. We cried so many tears while holding him and telling him all the while he made this decision out of love for him so he would not suffer. Our son died in my husband's arms peacefully after 45 minutes. My husband and I held a memorial at our house of worship the week after his death, as we chose to donate his body to Vanderbilt Children's Medical Center. We were told they harvested his heart for research, along with a part of his kidneys, lung, and a piece of his femur for a study on dwarfism. His body was cremated and buried with similar fetal abnormalities and stillborns whose bodies were donated for research at a special service 2 months after his death. Never in this process did it occur for us to discuss our options with a politician. Now, 22 years later, and no medical miracle has occurred, I do not understand why legislation such as this in Florida or any other states is being proposed in a country that we supposedly live in that gives us freedom and rights. The choice to terminate a pregnancy is a decision made by a woman and her doctor. politicians trying to limit the choices for women to become mothers or stepping back in time, and this harassment of women who know what is best for themselves and their families needs to stop now. And thank you again for allowing me to share my story today.
Lakita, thank you. And we know you've shared your story with others, and just admire your bravery. Thank you. I know that, I'm hoping these stories will get to the legislators. We're going to do everything in our power to make sure that they hear these. So thank you. And then the final person that we have joining with us today to provide her personal testimony is Gertie Remy. Gertie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gertie Remy, she, her, and hers. My abortion story is still real and painful to me today as it was when I had it at 17 years old. Yet it is still the best decision that I have ever made. When I was 17 years old and a senior in high school, I was secretly seeing, sorry, emotional. I was a virgin and really without a boyfriend due to my strict Catholic upbringing, and as well as my Haitian culture. However, I was secretly seeing this family friend who was 24 years old, and I was so in love with him, and he said that he was my boyfriend. But he asked that we keep our relationship a secret, and I did. At first, we were kissing and touching as time permitted through family gatherings. And then one night, he came by to pick me up. I snuck out of my house to be with him. He drove into a dark wooded park and began kissing me. I was okay with it, but I was also a little scared because we were outside. We never had our encounters outside before. In the back seat of his
Gertie, I think your internet's breaking up. Is that my internet or yours? Gertie, what I'm going to ask you to do, and if somebody could read her story. I'm sorry.
Almost 2 months.
I think that's what we're going to have to do. I want to share her story, Gertie, until it comes back, and then I'm going to read her story, if that's okay with everyone.
I really didn't know what I was doing because that's not how I wanted it.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be special.
Is she muted now?
And
I'm so sorry. Gertie, if you can y'all message her too herself, just in case? Okay, there was just a big delay. I am so sorry. I'm going to read Gertie's story, if that's okay. When I was 17 and a senior in high school, I was a virgin and really without a boyfriend due to my strict Catholic upbringing, as well as my Haitian culture. However, I was secretly seeing this family friend who was 24 years old, and I was so in love with him. At first, we were just kissing and touching as time permitted between family gatherings. But one night, we snuck out, and he came to pick me up. He drove into a dark wooded park area and began kissing me. I was okay with it, but was also a little scared because we were outside. We never had our encounters outside before. In the back seat of his car in the park in Brooklyn, I lost my virginity almost 2 months before my high school graduation. I really didn't know what I was feeling because that's not how I wanted it. I wanted that time to be special. I wanted to feel loved. I was always wanting to have difficulty in my menstruation. It would either skip a month, come very heavy or very light the other months, and not on a regular cycle. So when I was late, I didn't think much of it. It wasn't until 2 months later, with feeling nauseated, that I felt something was wrong. But I was focusing on graduation, so I was taking turns and drinking tea for indigestion and constipation, thinking that's what it must be. Meanwhile, I went to spend the summer in Massachusetts with my family and needed to not be around my boyfriend because rumors were that he was seeing another girl. He was rarely taking my calls or calling me back. Confused and very hurt, I tried to focus on my life after graduation. I decided to take a semester off from entering college. I was very depressed and hurt. My auntie was getting married that September, and I was one of her bridesmaids. I couldn't fit into our dress during our dress fitting. My auntie pulled me aside and asked me if I was pregnant. I wasn't sure how to answer that question, because over the summer, I felt that I might have been pregnant when my period didn't come. But I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go to my family. He wasn't answering my calls. I didn't get any information. I didn't have any money and had no way to drive anywhere. I was staying in a little town with my uncle and auntie and stuck in their house when they went to work. I had no access. And I just kept praying that whatever was happening in there would just go away. And that's why when I got back home to Brooklyn and my auntie asked me if I was pregnant, I was scared. But I told her I think I am. So instead of focusing on her wedding, she got in touch with him. He told my auntie that he was not with me, didn't want anything to do with the pregnancy, and that he had a girlfriend. But he told me to have an abortion, but was not giving me any money towards it. My auntie took me to the clinic and found that I was almost 20 weeks. And that was my first time seeing any medical professional and knowing for sure that I was pregnant. I was scheduled to have an abortion. It was an overnight stay. I was in the maternity unit at the hospital. I was in a room alone after several things were injected in my stomach, and I was left to wait. The staff really treated me badly. I was judged, questioned about my decisions to have an abortion. My door was left open, and I could hear the cries of newborn babies and family laughter. I was alone and starting to cramp, in major pain and scared. Hours later, the fetus was aborted, and I was alone, lonely, and I felt like shit. So many things went wrong from April to September that year, and I was never the same person again. The guy heard about my abortion, had the nerve to accost me and tell me I had killed his baby. My abortion story is about not having access due to so many factors and layers. My culture of being Haitian American and the morals and traditions in which sexuality is not spoken of, like contraceptives, reproductive health care, and abortion. Instead, it's don't have sex until you're married. Factors about being a Black woman in America, in which I am made to feel less than, which in turn causes mistrust in the system. I didn't turn to the system because I didn't think the system was designed to help me as a Black woman. Factors like not having money, a way to obtain information and transportation, not being educated in reproductive health and sexuality, to know that I had options, as well as the importance of using protection. I had an abortion, and for years I blamed myself and I shamed myself. However, my abortion was also a factor on how society views and treats reproductive rights and justice. And that's why I'm here to put a face to our stories, destigmatize abortion, and make sure that my body and my choices are not decided by lawmakers who are white men that have no understanding of what it's like to be me. I'm so sorry, Gertie, if you have a connection now, but thank you for letting me read that. It's such a powerful story. There's many reasons that people have abortions later in pregnancy. Like Gertie's story, lack of information, cultural stigma, inability to afford care, lack of providers. You know, in Florida, not everyone, they may be a young person who has to face onerous restrictions like the parental consent law. And we just really need to be aware that people need the dignity to make these choices for themselves, and doctors need to be able to provide the best care to their patients. And we're gonna finish up here with Charo Valero, who is the Florida State and Advocacy Director for National Latina Institute for Reproductive Justice.
Thank you, Laura. And thank you all for your courage and boldness in sharing these difficult stories. Good morning, my name is Charo, my pronouns are she, ella, and I'm with the Latina Institute in Florida. Just 2 weeks ago, on the 48th anniversary of the court ruling that legalized abortion access in the US, we, as a statewide coalition, the Floridians for Reproductive Freedom, of dozens of organizations across Florida, had a press conference talking about the barriers that keep people from being able to access care that is legal and safe in this country. On that same day, legislators in Tallahassee filed a piece of legislation that would be yet another barrier and is dangerous to women's health. Dangerous because it ignores women's individual needs or pregnant people's individual needs and circumstances, and it obstructs the sacred relationship that exists between a doctor and a patient. Instead of addressing this pandemic, legislators who are not medical experts are interfering with our reproductive care against the recommendations of doctors and organizations like American Medical Association, continue to introduce and pass legislation that chips away at the ability to access, obtain, and afford abortion care in Florida. Senate Bill 744 and House Bill 351 is a cruel attempt to ban abortion in the state of Florida past 20 weeks. Like Laura was talking about, and a lot of our stories illustrated, it's not always possible for a person to get an abortion as soon as they would like. Many things can stand in the way of early abortion care, including not knowing about it, not having access to services, inability to travel, sometimes travel out of state, the finances associated with it, structural and legal issues like statewide restrictive laws, no clinics near you, you're unable to get time off, you have no insurance that'll cover it. People who do not have the means, money, time, and sadly the know-how to navigate these systems are navigating a legislatively constructed obstacle course and are put in a situation to either terminate their pregnancy or carry their pregnancy to term. Also, later fetal diagnosis and health risks of the pregnant person tend to come later in pregnancy. And in these circumstances, making the decision to terminate a pregnancy is an incredibly difficult decision. And this is when these barriers are extremely cruel. At a time when we should be expanding access to care, our Florida legislature continues to put politics between doctors and patients. This bill will harm everyone, but its impact will be felt most acutely by communities of color, low-income people, immigrants, LGBTQ folks, and young folks who already face enough barriers and persistent health inequities. To truly support our communities, we need policies that improve and expand, not limit, access to a full spectrum of reproductive health care, which includes access to abortion. Our communities thrive when people of all immigration statuses have the ability, the resources, and support to make the healthcare decisions that are best for themselves and their families. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your stories and your courage. I open it now to any questions.
Just please hold while we wait for questions from reporters, and we're also just trying to navigate this online system, so thank you for your patience. If we do not get to your question or some other technical difficulty. Oh, here's one. Okay, from Isaac Morgan. Why are lawmakers denying people a chance to speak out by not allowing remote testimony? I'll take this unless others have thoughts. I'm not sure. I think that other states have. I know that Common Cause actually has a petition requesting the Florida legislature to open it up so that people can share their stories. As I mentioned in the beginning, even if we were able to be there in person and provide testimony, these experiences are so deeply personal and private, and thank you for sharing them publicly, that it would be really difficult to do. Number one, just to travel is hard. And then we even have seen during committee weeks that they're only giving people about a minute to testify, and it just doesn't do, in particular, this issue. I mean, Florida has a lot of weighty issues before them. And I think that it's extremely important, that the public do have that opportunity to shape legislation. And it's unfortunate that with the technology we have at hand, that the Florida legislature is not opening it up to the public. Thank you for the question. None of others have thoughts on that. All right, are there any other questions? Well, we have recorded this. I hope you've enjoyed it on Facebook Live, and thank you for joining this in Spanish and English. So we'll be reaching out to others. And if you are a reporter or the press that is on this call, you can reach out to Damian Filer for English interviews to follow up with any of our panelists. and to Maite Canino, who should be on the press release for any questions in Spanish. Charo, do you want to go ahead? No? Okay. All right.
I was just, there was a question in the chat that says that these bills have not been heard in committees, but what's the expectation?
No, we're still in committee weeks. We know that we have seen over 50 restrictions introduced in Florida just in the past 6 years. We know that the Florida legislature should be focusing on this real public health crisis of COVID instead of imposing these cruel restrictions on people's reproductive health care. But to date, they have not been heard. They have been assigned to committees though. And judging on the past in the Florida legislature, we do expect them to be heard. Thank you. All right, and that concludes this press conference. Again, thank you so much to our panelists from across the country. We deeply appreciate you sharing with us today. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.